over India, and there are many also international fellows as well, who are elected through a very tough sort of process over there. Only the best can become a fellow. Once you become a fellow, you have a title behind you, FNA, Fellow of the Indian National Science Academy. That shows that you have done something good in science, something new and novel in science. Only then you can become a fellow of the Indian National Science Academy. And we use these fellows to harness knowledge for humanity's welfare, to identify, nurture scientific talent in the country. So these fellows are also asked to go around the country to various schools and colleges and interact with the young scientists or young sort of students there. INSA is the adhering international academy as well. You know, there are at least 3 science academies in India. There's one medical academy. I come from the health field. I spent all my life at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and my field has been organ transplantation, kidney transplantation, or heart, or the liver transplant. But ever since I got connected with the Indian National Science Academy, I am sort of shifting to science policy and science diplomacy there. So as I said, that we have more than 1,000 fellows, we have more than 20 national committees as well, like the one that we have today. You know, the whole conference is being done under the aegis of the National Committee on CoDATA. And we talk about the data science and all that. Today everybody talks about the data science. The fellows of the academy are required to enhance the public understanding and engagement with scientific establishments. So being the internationally adhering academy, we have liaison with international organizations as well. That is one part that I used to see as the vice chair of the Congress of the academy here. INSA also serves as an enabler, a think tank, a mentor to Indian science, prioritizing service to society. Science is for society. I'll give you one example. During COVID-19, and you have all seen through the COVID-19 pandemic there, I used to write very frequently for the papers and newspapers on immunity, host immunity to COVID, and the vaccines and all. And there was a time when the Delta wave came. We had no idea whether the pandemic will end or not, how many more people will die, whether the vaccine will come or not. So I used to walk around my house to the people who build houses, you know, the labor class, ask them, what is the solution? How can we get out of this mess? Of course, most of them will be quiet. One guy told me, sir, answer will come from science. You know, that was really a remarkable statement from him. A common man, an uneducated guy, he thinks very high of science. So, you know, on the one hand, it actually makes you feel that the scientists have a very important role. They have to really do something big. And I'm so happy that during the COVID-19 time, although the vaccines normally take us 10 years to sort of come into the market, this time the vaccine came in 10 months. In 10 months the vaccine came. So that shows that if scientists all around the world can get together under one forum over there, and there comes the role of data science, CoDATA, data sharing, the people talk of big data sharing and all that. So the overall, if you look at the overall landscape, scientific landscape has been transformed in the last decade there. People's faith in science has increased. And you've seen that not only the field of medical sciences, but every field. And now, of course, India has also gone to the moon and lunar and this solar and all. And who knows that by the time you actually become scientists like us, you know, in 20 years time or so, sky is the limit over there. But I'm very, very happy that the theme of today's national conclave is climate education. Climate education is very, very important. During the last few years, I've been going around the country, going around the world, in fact, talking about the twin crisis of climate change and of AMR. AMR is the antimicrobial resistance. And we believe, and we in the field of health feel, that AMR is going to kill more people than even cancer. AMR is antimicrobial resistance. You sort of, somebody in the house falls sick, has fever or so, everyone in the house becomes a doctor. They say, oh, you take this antibiotic. Oh, you said that antibiotic. My friend took that and all. And this antibiotic resistance is developing. And you can see that the new viruses are coming and all. So because of all of this, we're going to face this challenge extremely hard. And coupled with climate change, it seems to us that the new data indicates that climate change actually drives AMR. So it is so very important to sort of talk about climate change. In fact, if you look at the real challenges that the humanity is going to face in the next 50 years or so, and that is something that you're going to face, these include clean energy, water, food, nutrition security, environmental pollution. Yesterday the news came that Delhiites are going to lose 8.2 years of their life because of the pollution. Gurgaon, where I live, it is 7.1 years so far. Bihar is probably 7 years or something. But all over India, we're going to lose about at least 5.4 years. And that is because of the pollution and the climate change. This is something that we have to be worried about. This is a challenge for us. It's a challenge for my new generation there. And we have to do everything possible. And today, again, the news came that the microparticles, polyethylene and all that you sort of you throw about the garbage all over. I just came back from Europe actually just 2 days ago. I was in this country called Austria, one of the most beautiful, cleanest countries. I never saw any pile of dust or of garbage anywhere, nowhere. And people go in the metro there. You of course buy the ticket there. I bought it for 4 days. There is, at the entry point, you don't have to show any ticket there, or even by coming out. Look at the level of honesty that they have. The honesty level is so very high, everybody buys it. I have not seen any country so far where you don't show up the ticket there, either tap it or something like that. Not in Austria. I think that should be our goal, that we want to reach a point that the country has to be clean, the environment that you live in, the surroundings that you live in have to be extremely clean. Because if we don't, this is going to create issues for us, the PM 2.5, as you know. But India is not the only country where we had this pollution there. China had it. China had it a few years ago, 10 years ago or so. They have controlled it. US had it also. So they passed their laws, they educated the community at large. People must know, and you guys have to go to your homes and all that, talk to your neighbors, everybody around and all that. Make sure that there's no garbage around there. Mosquitoes coming up and all that. The other day I was in a seminar, or in fact I was on a television show of the ET, and they were talking about dengue. Dengue virus also comes due to the mosquito there. And we are talking about the ICMR has created a vaccine now. No vaccine is going to be 100% proof unless you make sure that the environment is clean. During rainy season and all that, your plants, your pots, water over there, dengue comes during the rainy season, mosquitoes, and make sure that you don't have water stagnant anywhere. I think the young generation has a very important role to play over there. In fact, if we want to control diseases like dengue and others and all that, no vaccine is going to be very effective. I want to also highlight one other point, and then I will go back to my seat. you have seen that in 2024, India has become the most populous country in the world. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? Is it good? We now are the most populous country. We bet China in that. One other thing, of course, in 2014 we had only one startup. We had only 100 startups actually in India. Today we have 150,000 startups. That's a very positive point. All our youngsters are being taught to create jobs rather than go and seek jobs. Even if half of these startups will actually be successful, you can see where we go. By the way, more than half of these 140,000 startups are in the health field. So we're talking about creating vaccines, immunotherapy, and things of that sort. So I think these are the kind of things that you have to really look into. That is why I'm very keen that more of you should actually take up science as your careers. And science is, of course, very wide. I'm not only talking about medical science or engineering, all kinds of life sciences, mathematics, physics, chemistry, space, and others there. So I think I'm so very happy, and Gitanjali, so nice of you to have brought the school children over here. It's extremely nice to talk to you. We will interact with you throughout the morning, and I'm so glad that Matthew Pai is also here. He has come all the way from Belgium, and each one of us are going to talk to you about the climate and the climate education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mehra, for your inspiring words and for setting the tone of this conclave with such a vision and clarity. Moving forward our second session, we are honored to welcome Dr. Debashish Mohanty. He is the present director of National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. He is a renowned leader in the field of computational biology and artificial intelligence. He is a fellow of all three National Science Academies in India and has made extensive contribution to research in immunology and biotechnology using bioinformatics. With great pleasure, may I invite Dr. Debashish Mohanty.
Okay, thank you. So let me thank Gitanjali for taking the initiative, Dr. Pandey and INSA for providing this environment, and all our guests for being present here, and most important, thank you all for coming. So I think what Gitanjali had asked me to tell you about CoDATA India. So what Professor Mehra already told you, that INSA is the biggest scientific body in the country. But if you think today you have internet, then many years back we did not have internet. So if you want to know in physics or in biology what is happening in USA, what is happening in Europe, what is happening in Japan, how do you know? So people used to go and meet in conferences. So there are international, like each country's physics, like biochemistry will come, International Union of Biochemists, International Union of Astrophysics. So there are many international unions are there, and INSA is the coordinating body which coordinates with all other countries, and with all over the globe, all the scientists work together to solve the problems of the humanities. And like we have biochemistry, biophysics, astrophysics, organic chemistry and all. So data is also a very important part for all these areas, each area, whether it is biology, whether it is clinical science, other plant science or physics, data is a very important thing. So in addition to all these international union, there is an international union on data that is called CoDATA, Committee on Data. So that CoDATA, and it is not only one subject, it integrates data from all different areas. So Professor Mehra is the chair of the CoDATA National Committee. I am one of the members. Gitanjali has been one of the associate members, and there are members from chemistry. There are members from like Ayuka, who represent astrophysics, geophysics, and all this one. And for students, like our job is to make students in the country aware or the scientists aware how data can be used to solve problems. Like many of you told that you have come to this meeting to understand how data can be used to for this thing. So I'll just give you one of the examples, like you must have heard it somewhere. Like data is collected by scientists. Like scientists will work in the laboratory and collect data. So as a student, you may have a query, oh, if I am just analyzing data for all the things, how do I do new science? Like maybe I should go and collect some data. But if you think, there are many great discoveries which are being made by just analyzing the data. See, one of those of you who have read how DNA double helix was discovered, Watson and Crick did not do any experiment themselves. So the X pattern, the cross pattern of DNA, which is a fiber discretion, was the work of Rosalind Franklin. But that by itself was not enough to say the DNA is double helical. It only said some sort of a repeat structure is there, it can probably be helix. So then Chargaff's rule said the ratio of A and T and G or C are same, and some knowledge of chemistry was used to think of base pairing and the chemical structure of the nucleotide. And Watson and Crick, they synthesized all this information which was coming from many diverse sources to come up with the double helix structure of DNA, and that changed the entire biology, and the whole field of molecular biology was born. So now this is the way the data and anything can change this thing, and that is why this meeting is very important. And the climate is data is the most important. Like when as you want to do deep science, you want to go to different areas, we get fragmented, but we forget that we are all part of the ecosystem. Like anything in isolation cannot function like that. We are just for the purpose of making it easy. We are fragmented as chemist, biochemist, as Professor Mehra gave example. The antimicrobial resistance is also related to climate. So like if we like even the COVID, what people thought it has crushed genetic barrier. This was a virus which was there in the with certain animals or the bats in who were deep inside forest, and now if you don't maintain the environment, destroy forest or some way they come in contact, those viruses can come and create havoc. So that is why it is very important, and that's why a concept has called what is called One Health. So don't think of that health of human health is just hospitals and all can solve it, because what is coming is many antibiotic resistance is coming through our food chain, because we are using lot of the antibiotics for the poultry, chicken or meat and all these. Then that is coming through food chain and affecting our health. And if the environment is destroyed, so that can affect in a very, very drastic way. And I will just end by giving one example, which is we have faced it practically. How many of you thought in the middle of Delhi you can have something like a flash flood, which you see in the pictures in the Himachal Pradesh or something happening? This happened in my institute, the National Institute of Immunology. Our library got entirely destroyed. We are lucky that people could exit, because nowadays people go online. Library had only 3 or 4 people. So the way, if you see, JNU has almost a 500-acre campus. It's a green campus, the lot of greenery, and there are a lot of water bodies inside. And though when it was here many years back, there were not this many people were there, but there is a lot of neighborhood developed around Basankonj and all these things. Over here, things have always not moved in a planned manner. There are a lot of water probably from bus other side is entering into the JNU campus. They are accumulating in some lake which is at a height where we are located, and now suddenly some barrier broke, and within a span of few minutes a huge amount of water. So earlier it was planned where our institute is built, below there are big municipal pipes through which this water was going, and for 30 to 35 years or almost 40 years we have been there, we never had this problem. But suddenly if one such thing, because this due to all sorts of unplanned things, when this happens, so much of water comes within 5 minutes, and it can cause situation like flash flood. There were apartments which were in the basement, they got affected. So even inside Delhi also you can be affected. So that is why it is important. Right now what we could do, we have to keep track of how many lake-like things are there, how much water is accumulating, then how much water is coming from outside. So all this can be done only if you have good data about around the environment, atmosphere, and all these things. And so I think this is going to be an interesting meeting, and that is what you will learn from Dr. Pai's talk and anything, how all these climate data we can use to address a lot of these things. I will just give you some of you, when Professor Mehra was asking, many of you didn't raise your hand, do you want to do science or something? But now even science and humanities are merging. Like if you see that the companies like Microsoft, Google, they are also hiring people from humanities background, and you must have heard something called large language model, which we are hearing in the context of AI and machine learning. So how did large language model develop? That is, there is a field called NLP, natural language processing. So people started thinking, we have our languages, we talk, languages is a subject of humanities probably. Like in language has something interesting. The word doesn't have a meaning in isolation. The word has a meaning in the context where it is used. So this word is linked to another word which you would have written 5 words before this or 5 words after this. If you swap the order, the meaning will be entirely different. So this concept was used in the large language model to develop most powerful things like what ChatGPT is, AI is. So this difference between science and humanity is blurring out, like they are all integrated. It is not doing science per se, thinking guided by science, like to be rational, be logical and all. So that's why irrespective of whatever is your interest, if we come together, we can learn much more. So have a nice day. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohanty, for your insightful introduction to CoDATA India National CET. Now we are moving for our third session. We are now delighted to welcome Mr. Matthew Pai for inaugural address. He is the founder of Climate Academy and a full member of the Club of Rome. Since 2007, he has taught philosophy at European schools, Brazil, and has dedicated his career to bridge the gap between climate science and public awareness. Please welcome Matthew Pai.
Changing the slide, you can use this one.
Perfect. Thank you. Great. So just go like this. Got people looking after me over there as well. Good morning, and it's wonderful to be here, both with all these young minds, young energy, and all this experience and expertise on the front row. In many ways, that's actually symbolic of what the Climate Academy does. The Climate Academy has set it up so that young people can be empowered to not only understand this top-level science, but also bring it into the wider world. And often you do that through engagement with experts. So it's wonderful to have both sides of things here. Okay, thank you. I'm going to give you a very a headline tour of what the Climate Academy is about. And everything which I say in the next 20 minutes, you can find it for free here. So it's absolutely critical that everybody understands science and the science of climate change. So I wrote this and it's free. It's a PDF and you just go on the website, you can download it and you can start reading it. Just like with climate semantics, which I'll mention later, we're totally committed to the public understanding of science. Because if we don't understand the fundamentals as a society, then we're in trouble. Okay. So I'm going to give you this morning a systems perspective on the climate crisis, which is a bit different to how it is normally done in schools. I don't need to introduce myself, other than to say that down in the bottom corner on the right there, it's got the date 2012. And that's an important date for me because I thought I was educated. I teach still philosophy in a prestigious school in Brussels. Lots of my students go to Oxford and Cambridge, things like that. So you could think that you're educated. But I went to a talk in 2012. Like this? Okay. I went to a talk in 2012 that just blew my head off. I couldn't believe I didn't know that before. So I was definitely not educated. This was so important. So I'm going to give you some of what I heard in 2012. I'm going to pass it in turn on to you. I don't think there's time for that. Let's just jump to this. So like I said, there's this book, and essentially, just as was said by the distinguished speaker before, just now, the climate crisis is not just about science. It also involves psychology and things like that. But of course, the starting point for understanding climate science is rooted in data. You've got to get your facts right. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of half information out there, and it's absolutely critical that young people have a clear view of where it is. So this textbook takes you from all of the critical science data into all the social, psychological aspects of things. Okay, so what is the data? Well, the data is emphatically clear. Climate change is happening, and it's caused by humans. And it's measured in a laboratory, in an observatory, in Hawaii. Every day they measure the atmosphere, and they can see that we are now at 426 parts per million. Now, when you look at that graph, that's an incredible level of CO2. So today may feel like a kind of maybe an average Friday, but this Friday is a bit weird. I know it doesn't feel weird, but it is very weird. We've not had a level of CO2 in the atmosphere like that for 4 million years. This graph actually could go back much further. Now, you may say, well, what does this mean? Well, science has understood that the level of CO2 makes the planet hotter. We've known this since 1824. A French physicist, Fourier, he understood that. There's a later dynamics of this chemical thing by Eunice Foote, a female scientist. Great to see females put their hands up to do science. Great. And we know now about climate change with what's called sigma 5 certainty. You can Google that later. Now there's a picture of my son. He's looking happy, and he's looking happy because he doesn't have a temperature. If you had a temperature of 1.5 degrees today, you would have stayed at home. If you have a temperature of 2 degrees, that's a fever, really bad fever. You probably can't even watch Netflix. A temperature of 4 degrees, you're going to die in 24 hours without medical assistance. That's a medical emergency. Now, you might have heard of 2 degrees in the Paris Agreement. You might have heard about 1.5, things like that. But do you really understand how critical that is for the planet? And it's only when you start to think about temperature from a systems level, from a system perspective, that it becomes meaningful. Because our planet currently already has a bit of a fever. We are already at 1.4. And if we don't stop our emissions, we're on path to 3.5 by the end of this century. So we are in a bit of a medical emergency. And I've just thought now, as you were talking about COVID in your introduction, how strange is it that we don't, as humanity, we're not driven by data on climate science like we were with COVID. In COVID, we understood the threat, and we listened to science, and we allowed scientists to set government policy. We allowed science to actually make our lives quite difficult, but we trusted science. The data for climate science is equally critical, it's equally existential, but somehow we're deaf to it. We don't allow the same space for science to dictate things. And that's because, and this is what my talk is about, it's what the Climate Academy is about, is that in some ways some of the data is not clear publicly. It's very clear to the scientists, but it's not clear publicly. And secondly, we don't have the right vocabulary, we don't have the right words, we don't have the right metaphors to understand the threat. So the Climate Academy is about bringing this understanding of the data into metaphors and images which make sense, and empowering you to then communicate that to the rest of the world. Okay, so what does the data say? How close are we then to these critical moments? Well, we have 80 gigatons of carbon left before we get to 1.5 degrees. There's some very clever physicists, PhDs in deep physics on the atmosphere, and they've worked out that we actually have 680 gigatons left for 2 degrees. The problem is that as humanity, we are emitting 42 gigatons of CO2 every year. And you don't need a PhD in maths to work out that we are extremely close to 1.5. And we are about 17 years away, more or less, to 2 degrees. So these are the key data for us as humans. And it actually reminds us, again, I was sat there listening to those very insightful introductions. When my son was born, he actually was born he scored only 1 out of 10 when he was born. Normally when you're born, you're crying, you're screaming, you're kicking your legs. And if you do that, that's great, because it means you're alive. It means you're like, I'm in the world. My son only scored 1. 0 is you're dead. 1 is like, you're on the edge. Now, in those early weeks, that when he was in an incubator and when the doctors monitored meticulously the oxygen levels, all these dials, because this human life was precious and it was all protected by accurate data. Now, how many of you know before today that we are this close away from 1.5 and this close to 2 degrees? How many people understand that 2 degrees is actually already quite a bad fever, and that 4 degrees means that the planet doesn't function anymore? How many people understand that? For many people, climate change is sort of just this vague threat about maybe sea levels or extreme weather or something like that. So you've got to have a clear understanding of how all this fits together. And there's one last piece in the jigsaw here, and that is that the reason that you've heard about 2 degrees as part of the Paris Agreement is that, it's just my little thing is slowed down. Well, I keep talking, but it'll probably catch up in a minute and then go 10 slides ahead. There's a line there which represents 2 degrees, because scientists say that after 2 degrees, we enter into a new territory that we don't know what will happen next. You could call it a minefield, if you like. And after 2 degrees, what we get into is a territory of tipping points. So, yeah, could you click? Next slide. I could touch the screen. Great, thanks. Oh, like that. Okay, all right, thanks. So, this line 2 degrees is critical, because after 2 degrees, what can happen is that the whole system gets destabilized. I'll show you what I mean. So if we go to 3 degrees, we know that the Amazon rainforest will collapse at 3 degrees. You've got millions of years of evolution, and the Amazon rainforest has grown up in this stable temperature thing. Just like a laptop works at 110 volts, it doesn't work at 180 volts. A laptop at 180 volts, you just get smoke. Well, it's a bit the same with the Amazon rainforest. If we deforest it, the number actually comes down. But you can now imagine if the Amazon rainforest collapses, what's the knock-on effect from that into the other ecosystems and environmental systems? And we start entering into a planet Earth that doesn't look recognizable to humans. And here is a map that is the most important map, I argue, in the world. And I know that across the world, students can graduate from high school, you can go to university, and you've never seen that map. To me, that's absolutely crazy. This is a map of all the Earth systems which are in a beautiful dance with each other, in a balanced dance over millions of years. And they all fit with each other. And we are destabilizing that by ramping the temperature up to 2 degrees, maybe 3. This is absolutely critical information. But the problem is that we've inherited an education system where you do physics, you do biology, you do geography, you do art, history, we have it all in boxes, and we don't have a global view. So climate change just sort of fits sometimes into geography here or biology there, and you do it a bit the same each time, but you don't get deep. That's insane. We're working with a system which is 150 years old, essentially, a siloed system of education, and we have a blind spot, a critical blind spot. So in 2012, when I found out about this for the first time, and was almost 40, it's like, that can't be right. That's just not correct. So that's why I started the Climate Academy. This has to be universally understood and known. Okay. Right. So let's get to some, once you establish this systems perspective, so once you zoom out to the climate crisis from a systems perspective and you start, some things start to kind of become clear. So I'm going to take you through a couple of these. Now, the Climate Academy works with the top scientists. Again, it's critical. If you don't have the right data, forget it. Everything has to be driven by reliable science. So all of what I'm saying and everything inside this textbook, we got all of those people to read the scientific chapters, and they've approved this as being authoritatively correct. So I might be a guy from Manchester, but I'm a guy from Manchester originally who has talked with experts to get it right. Okay? Now, all of these people, and there's a long list, they have approved for communication some amazing numbers. And I'm just going to invite you now to shout out. We'll have like a word bubble, a live word bubble. Shout out the name of the country which you think emits the most CO2, or who, I should be a bit more sharp in my question, who's most responsible, which country is most responsible for carbon emissions? I'm going to count to 3, and then you're going to say your country. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, go. It's always the same bubble. There's the USA, there's China, there's India. There's the trilogy, the trinity of the bad guys. Does anybody want to dissent from that, actually? Name a country if it's not in that top 3. Okay, good. Well, let me tell you the truth. These numbers, which I'm going to show you now, this is what happens when you take that carbon budget. Remember those buckets from before, okay? And you divide that bucket per person. And I think that's a fair start. I think that the atmosphere belongs to everybody. I don't think now I'm a Belgian citizen, I don't think as a Belgian I have more right to breathe than somebody from Indonesia. Okay, so we divide that budget per person, and then you group them into countries then. You say, okay, you give them everybody a budget. Well, here's the country with the highest emissions in the world. Let's see where China is. Well, there's the USA. It's pretty bad. Belgium, yeah, I'm totally guilty. I'm here with a lot of humility. There's Russia. There's China. And it's just approximately the same as the UK. Now, the BBC continually talk about the UK as a leader in climate. It is a leader in climate. It's a leader in causing climate change. And in fact, if you were to put a bowl over the UK since the Industrial Revolution, and if the UK had to live under its own emissions, it would already have 4 degrees. So we very generously, in our very colonial way, shared our emissions with the rest of you. Okay. Let's keep going, because we need to... Where's India, you think? Where's India? Well, you have to go a very long way. And the second thing about these numbers is that this phone here is my phone. I use that phone, I enjoy using that phone, it's my phone, I bought that phone. But it was made in China. Now, if you look at the media, the data in the media, it only looks at what are called territorial emissions. So they say, oh, look, where are the emissions coming from? Oh, they're coming from China. So in fact, when you said China, in some ways you're correct. China has 26% of all emissions. But why do they have 26%? Well, one answer is because they're making all the stuff for the rich countries at the top of the list. So the rich global north has exported its emissions. And then, weirdly, it points at those countries and says, stop doing that. Well, hey, we're making your stuff. Now, this only becomes clear when you have clear data. Now, how many people know about the Codex Index? How many media organizations use the Codex Index? When you go to COP negotiations, do they use these numbers there? No. They keep everything at a very global level. They say, wow, we're all in this together. Yeah, we are all in it together. But some of us are, if you want to be diagnostic, if you want to be medical about it, you want a clear diagnosis. Where are they coming from? So, in fact, some countries could actually increase their emissions and we'd still be okay. So data is absolutely critical. Okay, and when you have clear data, some words then become, you start to see things in a different way. So in my classroom, if a student talks about the green transition, I start eating the chair, or a table, or a textbook, or my phone, I don't care. I just start eating something. And then they think, oh, you're a bit of a weirdo. Well, they might think that anyway, when you're a philosophy teacher, you know. It's like, but they say, what's the problem? I say, why do you say green transition? Say, well, because of all the extra green energy, all the solar panels. So, okay, that's a good idea. We should be doing a green transition, but we're not doing one now. Look at the numbers at the bottom of the screen. In 1995, when we started COP, when we started talking about climate at an international level with this convention, we were doing 29 gigatons. Now, remember that bucket from the start? It was 42. Well, that's where we are now. Those numbers are going up. Why are we talking about a green transition? So, I challenge you, next time you hear somebody say green transition, you stop them. You may or may not eat the table, that's up to you. And you say, why don't you say energy addition? We're in an energy addition phase. Now, isn't that weird? So just the simple data. This is all the data I have. Like I said, it's from these top scientists, but it's publicly available. It's in the UN reports. You know, the emissions gap report every year comes out. You have the IPCC reports. This data is not like secret or something. But somewhere, somehow, in our imaginations, in our understanding, we've got a very foggy view of things. And we don't speak about it clearly. And going back to COVID, because we don't speak about it clearly, and because we don't have a clear view of the science and the data, then our actions are just limp. We are not forced to really think about a solution. That, like you said, for the vaccine, normally it takes 10 years. We did it in 10 months. If we don't have clear data, if we're not framing this with the clear concepts and with clear data, then our energy levels are not intense enough. Our imagination, our creativity, we're not driving at it with the intensity that we need, that really happens when you have a clear view. So this is why I started the Climate Academy. Okay, I've nearly finished. I've got a few last myths to do. So, another thing in schools are, I'm going to say, obsessed with the individual carbon footprint. It's good. You should be concerned about your carbon footprint, okay? I don't have a car, for example. I use public transport. That's my little, in a sense, gesture towards that. But you know that narrative about the individual carbon footprint, that's fueled by the fossil fuel industry. They have pumped millions, billions into that. so that you think about your own individual guilt and you don't ask the structural questions of the energy system. So it feels good because it's tactile, but actually it's a distraction from the deeper questions. And schools don't, I'm going to argue that schools across the world, secondary schools, do not get further than primary school level understanding of climate change. Almost everywhere. I've been around the world, I've been to Sweden, I've been to all these countries thinking they're educated or advanced. Nobody is advanced on climate education, both in terms of understanding the science and in terms of the response. They're in this cliched view of small individual actions. Okay, plastic waste, another thing. If we stop using plastic, full stop, how much would it affect? Well, the answer is only 3%. So plastic is almost irrelevant to climate change. Okay. Paper. Teachers see me in the corridors. They see me holding this and they're like, oh, Mr. Pye, sir, what are you doing? I thought you were green. You've got paper. That's like naughty. And because I'm carrying a whole stack of them, I'm like, give me a break. What about you and your phone? You think data is efficient and it looks clean? But you just think about the energy impact of having all your data in a cloud. Just think for a second the difference. The carbon in my hand is almost a trophy. It's like, yeah, I sucked, or the tree sucked, sorry. The tree sucked carbon out of the atmosphere, and I'm holding it, and it's not in the atmosphere. You should be celebrating that. Okay, I've got lots more to. So in summary, to wrap up, this is what I'm going to say is a greenwash school. If your school is doing all of this, great. It's a good start. 99.9% of schools around the world are doing that. But I'm going to say, and I'm going to be brutal because you need to be brutal, I'm going to say it's greenwashing if you only do that. All of those things are important, but you need to be transformative. If I say climate change to you, and if you're just like before when I said, what country do you think about with climate change? You said China, India, America. If I say climate change to you, you might well think recycling plastic, blah, blah, blah. How many of those words would pop into your head if I said climate change? How many of you would think tipping points? And that's the most important thing. If you're a climate scientist, you go to bed at night and you're thinking about your data, fundamentally you're thinking about we can't have these tipping points. That's where the real action's taking place. How many of you, when you do economics, lots of people are interested in commerce, you can go to university and study economics with being completely ignorant of planetary boundaries. That's mad. That's like going to do architecture and saying, yeah, but I'm doing architecture, but not with physics. I'm opting out of the Newton bit. Well, if you want to do economics, you have to be informed about the planetary boundaries, about the environmental systems on which every single piece of the economy depends. So that should be the trigger in your brain. When I say climate change, you should say degrowth or capitalism or whatever. Okay. And so to finish, the Climate Academy, which I set up, starts with the systems understanding. And then we bring students into the world where you then bring it, all of what I'm saying to you, you can say it. I've been in so many talks where my students do the talking, not me. When they say this, in some ways, it's even more powerful. So some of my students have been to Italy on a holiday, but the holiday wasn't to do tourist things. The holiday was to go into schools and give talks. And they loved it. We did a whole tour, just like Gitanjali has set up this incredible tour for me in Delhi for the last 10 days. My students were on tour in Italy, going around schools, being rock stars, talking about tipping points. And they loved it. So, to finish, this is my second last slide. So those are the ways in which you can do it, okay? If there's more time, I'd talk you through it, but essentially, in a school, if you want to start a climate academy, not everybody has to do it. You'll need a few people. But those few people, they do videos, they do social media posts, they do articles, they teach in classrooms, they can do street art, street plays, podcasts, conferences, protests, you name it. You could do all of that. It depends on what you're most interested in. And you can see there a number in the top left-hand corner. And that number is maybe the most important number for this second section, and that is the 3.5%. So the 3.5%, what is that? Well, it's a rule. This is my last slide. This is a rule about how societies change. Because right now you can look out in the world and think, oh my goodness, there's Donald Trump, there's like all kinds of geopolitical forces taking place. It's hopeless. Those numbers before, the green transition, no, it's an energy addition, it's hopeless. Well, the surprising thing is that if you look at all social revolutions in the 20th century, they've never needed more than 3.5% of the population to fully engage to have a transformative impact. Sometimes it's less, like Gandhi. It was closer to 2%. The civil rights movement, again, closer to 2%. Those are the people on the streets, writing letters, the lawyers, the people organizing the meetings, the people actively engaged. It's only ever a tiny number. But what happens is they start saying the headlines, they start saying tipping points, they start saying carbon budgets, they start saying all of this systems informed stuff, and everybody else goes, oh yeah, let's do that. Because it's just common sense. Of course, there's always a 10% somewhere who are zombies, who are idiots, who are racist, or who are whatever. There's always some resistance somewhere. But they're irrelevant in the end. So you could be the 3.5. So to finish, what would be successful for me today is if I talk with 3 of you. Well, 3, because 3.5 is weird. So if I talk with 3 of you, and you start a climate academy in your school, fantastic. Because it's transformative. Because what you've felt now with my talk, I'm confident about this, not because of my ego, but just because of the data. I'm confident that you feel a sort of revelation. You feel like, oh, I've never quite seen it like that before. That feeling that you have now, you can cause that in a geography class in your own school. You can cause that in an event where you invite your parents along. There's no magic here. This is just data. But data which is coherent and systems perspective, data which is clear and has got the right vocabulary with it. Thank you.
Please stay here in this place for panel discussion.
Yeah, stay. Oh, Q&A, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Data science. You said 1.5 will come in 2027. I think we are already 1.48 or something.
Yeah.
1.47. I haven't seen that kind of cloud bursts. You know, I've seen a lot of monsoons than you guys have. I've never seen that many cloud bursts. And today, our Ravi, the river Ravi, has changed its course. All the houses are being washed away and all that. That's the effect of climate change. And the climate change effect is also being seen in the health field, with the kind of diseases we are seeing now. We are very soon, and I'm talking to my young doctors in AIMS and all that, that we need to be talking about climate sensitive diseases now. That's going to be a new field. So my feeling is that in 2024, we came very close to 1.5. In fact, there were a lot of papers which said we have barely touched. So I'm saying we are 1.48 now, maybe in 27, you're right, if we were 1.5, but we are already seeing the effect. You know, in my younger days, when I was as young as them, we used to love monsoons, you know, because all our Bollywood romantic Songs are on monsoon only. And Dr. Negi was saying that she's coming from a state which is very unstable now, because look at the amount of rains, and the mountains or the hills are coming down actually. So this is what we're going to see unless we act now. So I think we need to organize more and more interactive sessions on climate education, climate change.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, just to be very technical about the 1.5, I can indulge a little detail. The official 1.5 is a 10-year rolling average. That's why we've actually gone over it, but the 10-year average is still just a bit lagged behind. That's the little difference there. Are there any questions?
Anybody from the audience? I don't want any of you to say that monsoon is going to be bad. You know, monsoon means too many rains, too many houses falling, people dying and all. We used to wait the whole year for the monsoons to come. Yes, madam, please.
Yeah, hi. We already know that we are in a bad state. We all can see, but what the action plan? Like, what's the what we can do as a normal civilian?
Yep.
So what we like? I want that action
Yep.
in a crisp form.
Thank you for the question.
I think scientists are only known to flag the problems, but not finding a solution that very quickly. Yes,
Yeah.
Matthew, this is a question for you.
I think, because I disempowered you, didn't I, about individual action. So let me put something back on the table. First, there are three things. First, education. We have never communicated to young people or to voters or to citizens the clear thing about climate change. Like, we know about it, but not in this sharp, clear way. So education can be transformative. And of course, I've set the Climate Academy up for secondary schools, but it's valid for universities, it's valid for businesses. Businesses should start little climate academies. Or individuals, communities. Everybody should know this. So that's number one, education. Number two is media. The media doesn't report on climate change clearly. The BBC is terrible. It's terrible, not just on the figures between UK and India and so on, but it only talks about climate change in terms of extreme weather events. It never uses the word tipping points. It never really analyzes carbon budgets or planetary boundaries. And thirdly, the law. That's the big one. We look at those movements before on the slide for the 3.5%. What did Martin Luther King, what did he advocate for? What did Gandhi advocate for? They advocated for systemic change, legal change. Martin Luther King didn't sit down after and say, yeah, we should have like more comfy chairs in coffee areas for black people because you know that. No, he wanted full systemic change, and that was his eye on the prize. So when students are in the world and they're advocating for change, they should be advocating for legal change at international level, at local level, at national level. The law is their background matrix. That's the powerful level. Because we're at the point now, we can't fix things with little things on the side. We can only fix it by getting hold of the whole system. And how do you get hold of the whole system? Through the law. Parliamentary law, human rights law, international law. And we're not focused on that. Even the climate strikes, we're not really focused on that. That's the focus of the Climate Academy. Advocates for leverage points. Education, media, law.
Anybody else? Yes? Yeah,
I think being a mother of a teen boy, I really want ki every teenage should come up and like they are very apt in social media and technology. Nowadays everything is like very instant, trending, and they can avail this as a medium, like you said, as a media. So being a new generation, new transformation, they can create a transformation like Gandhi. Everyone is a Gandhi.
Yeah.
So they can create a revolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have my own Gandhi.
I think there's a Gandhi in every student or everyone present here. So my question to sir will be like, climate data science is often dominated by techies and someone who is from environmental department or someone from science only. But how can students or people coming from humanities or commerce background can contribute?
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. Essentially, what I've done, my job, I think, is to take the top level science and the IPCC reports and these UN reports and make it digestible so that you understand it just at that level, but also to pick out what the key data is, because that's one of the big problems with science. If you're a young person, you don't know, well, which data matters. It's great to have lots of data, but it's also critical to know which data is the key data. And that's what's missing in climate education. We're not talking about all the things that were on my bingo card. So once you have that data, you're then empowered. Because you know, for example, like, let's just take the India example. If you go and give a talk and you say for India it's 1.4, you're using the authority of scientists to make your point. And nobody can argue with that. You're saying, well, if you argue, you're not arguing with me, you're arguing with the scientists. And that's why, just to finish that point, with Sri Lanka, in the next weeks, I will train the Sri Lankan government, the environmental department, on that data, because when they go to COP meetings, they are then empowered to be able to bring this truth to the table. Because at COP meetings, nobody wants to look at that data. They only want to look at the global level because the UN, like the IMF, like the World Bank, the global architecture is essentially colonial. So this is very empowering data for them to put that on the table, to say, hey, listen to me, I'm only 1.4.
Matthew, thank you so much. I think with this we end this session, and there will be the next session panel, and then we will have a lot of time for interaction.
Okay.
Thank you, Matthew, for your such a thought-provoking address. Now we are moving forward for our panel discussion on climate education in STEM for India. So we have our first panelist, Mr. Matthew Pai, founder, Climate Academy. Then Dr. Debashish Mohanty, the current director, National Institute of Immunology. Then Professor Suresh Babu, director CUES, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University. And then Dr. Sushila Negi, associate head and scientist 5, Science and Tech Department, Building and Capacity Division. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Gitanjali Yadav. Dr. Yadav is a senior scientist at National Institute of Plant Genome Research. Thank you.
Okay, this mic we will keep on the table and I can speak here so they can have something. Thank you very much. Once again, a good morning. I would say now almost good afternoon to everybody. This little panel discussion, we were thinking what topic should we have on this? We are going to talk about climate, we're going to talk about STEM, education, and about the policy level large structural changes that Matthew just talked to you about. Has anybody read Kafka's Metamorphosis? In Kafka, well, the philosophy teacher would have. So in this book, so what I was thinking, the title of this one would be Waking Up as a Dung Beetle. Anybody knows what a dung beetle is? In Kafka's Metamorphosis, if you read that book, there's the hero Gregor Samsa. He wakes up one morning and discovers that he's a bug. And then instead of panicking, he worries about getting late to work. He looks at the clock and says, oh, I gotta get to work. What does that mean? Absurdity drowned in routine. Very much like our very own Delhi. What happens here? The city is lurching from heat waves to floods. You heard Dr. Mohanty talk about flash floods in the library. So the city is lurching from this to apocalypse, and yet the daily hustle is always on. Cars are sealed, your air conditioning is on, complaints are buried inside commutes. From far off, it looks like apathy. But is it apathy? Not quite. A staggering 94% of Indian adolescents, many of them are you, say that they feel the direct impacts of climate change. Can any of you raise your hand and say that you feel the direct impact of climate change? Yes or no? None of you feel the direct impact of climate change, and I'm just wanting to get some idea about whether at all you feel that there's something different over your lifetime, over your student time itself. Nearly half of these students who were under the survey, they reported anxiety, and these are adolescents, teenagers like yourselves. But adults are also worried. Adults, even 1 in 3 adults has not heard, every 1 in 3 adults has not heard of the word global warming. And despite this, so we constantly talk about climate change, but I don't think we are engaging with it at all. When India voted in 2024, all of you are aware of the voting cycle we had last year. Climate did not make the cut, not in the speeches, not in debates, not in polls. Jobs, inflation, welfare, these are the center stage. They should always be, of course. This is but a paradox. People are worried, but their worry gets muted by survival pressures, things that are far more important, they believe, which are immediately right now for us. Relentless competition, rising costs, unclear signals of what is actually going on. Climate anxiety does not scream, it simmers. And a recent 2024 report again finds that many Indian youth feel ill-equipped to respond emotionally, civically, or with sustained hope. So how do we make space for action in this age of silent dread? India CoDATA, which was introduced to you today, and the panel of August luminaries sitting in front of you today, we invite you to engage with us and find out and have more occasions to have such discussions. We have, of course, you just heard Dr. Matthew Pai, the founder of Climate Academy. I would want him more to talk about values, ethics, and moral education. But this panel discussion guiding theme is going to be building climate literacy and resilience through data, through pedagogy, and through policy. Our keynote speaker, Matthew, philosopher and founder of the Climate Academy, has just shared his views on how climate education can, rooted in ethics and emotion, can transform paralysis into purpose. He's now being joined on stage by sociologists, by data scientists, policymakers, as well as educators to ask the question for you guys and for you to explore other questions that may be asked related to what it is that should change around us and within us for the next generation to truly engage with climate change. So to begin with, I'm going to give a chance to each one of the panelists in front of me to have an opening round of questions. And this opening round of questions is basically just to warm you up about your views on what you heard today and what your projection is. So my first question is to Professor Suresh Babu. Suresh, as director of one of the centers of excellence in universities, how do you see the role of higher education institutions in nurturing climate-ready graduates with both skills as well as sensitivity? Over to you, Suresh. Do you have a mic?
Yeah.
Ji.
Thank you.
Hi, mic. Hona chahiye tha.
Thank you, the organizers, for having me here. To be very honest,
You have to pick up this one, yeah. I think.
Allow me just a minute to sort of set up the preface, because I was not very sure where I'm actually going today, because I don't know, students also are probably very familiar. There's a lot of meetings and things that happen on climate change, right? Most of it is very routine. I'm delighted I took a big risk. I have no idea. I had no idea what the conversation is going to be. I'm delighted.
Thank you.
The reason is that the run-of-the-mill stuff, the garden variety climate activities, all of us are all involved in. What we heard from Matthew today is actually something that you need to write on the notebook of your little diaries, go home. The problem that we are facing, I'll come back to the specific question, Gitanjali, just
It's
after
all right.
just a couple of minutes here, because for India, the issue with climate change, at least in part, is how to wrestle with untruth and just lies and scams. And I'm not talking about the scams within India. That's not the question. The scams within the climate change. So I started my career as a scientist. I'm primarily from environmental sciences. I worked with the Ministry of Environment and Forest for about 8 years before I withdrew back into academics. Now the point is that, was climate change a discussion then? It was. Climate change was already a discussion in 2000. But when I went back into academics, I happened to, incidentally, the place where I work, the School of Human Ecology, I happened to have the opportunity to listen to a lot of conversation from social scientists. That's, I'll come back to the point that we started the conversation earlier with Professor Mehra. There is a lot of critical thinking in political sciences, social sciences, particularly sociology. Now there is a complete field called political ecology. There's a lot of discussion that I actually, initially I would be like, what are these guys even talking about? And all of this seems superfluous and whatnot. But in about 10 years of this cross-pollination, I have finally got to a point where I could not teach the regular subjects that I would teach, like climate science, I would teach earlier. After a gap of 5 years, I actually offered the climate course last year. You know why? The reason is, you guys, and some of us, I guess, we have been liberated by the data revolution. You can't lie a lot now. It's not so easy. In the sense that if you're actually looking for a specific parameter that has changed in the last 20 years, you can find it. It's not so difficult to, hide it. You can dig around and you will find material and you will find the correct things. And half the academics from my fraternity are panicking with ChatGPT and so on and so forth. I think it's delightful. In fact, yesterday I was sitting with a PhD student who works in Pithoragarh in Uttarakhand, where they are facing all kinds of things with the climate change and so on. And I was actually discussing, so he was like, so I was just showing him some very, we're just working with some material, how fast you can glean through stuff now. I mean, yes, you have to be cautious whether it is properly peer reviewed and is it from some authentic sources. So the data revolution is finally bringing this generation closer to some forms of truth that my generation actually did not have access to be very fair. What Matthew did not specifically use the word politics, but what is being said here is that while we are stressed, like we should do, schools, colleges, I'm from a university system, we should do all the local level climate action and individual level climate action, whatever we must do. But as students, what I would expect is that develop a very strong sense of critical thinking. Very, very strong of critical thinking. If somebody says 1.5 degrees, where is that coming from? Who said this? Where is the evidence? Did somebody go back 5,000 years ago and measure the CO2? There is evidence, but where is that coming from? So develop a sense of critical thinking. It doesn't matter your inclination is towards English literature or economics. Like I think as colleagues have shared before, these themes are just going to disappear. Most of it is going to disappear. Yeah, that doesn't mean a traditional training in sciences is not beneficial. For that matter, a traditional training in economics is not going to be beneficial. But the speed at which we are learning things, the rate of the learning curve is completely changed in the last 5 years. So that was, sorry, I went off track a little bit.
That's all right. Their attention span, you have to also, children's attention span and
Right.
our attention spans are becoming so much shorter. We're watching reels rather than lectures. So I think they're understanding what you're saying.
So I think it is fantastic because I usually do not have opportunity to talk to school children, but I think you are going to very soon come into university systems. This is a fantastic time. There's a lot that you can glean off that we could not. And when you talk about climate, be very strong in terms of critical thinking. Ask the questions, uncomfortable questions. Whether the teachers or whether you are able to get the right answers, please write in the margins that you can explore later. Don't leave it. Yeah. I just wanted to say with respect to climate education in schools and colleges, the National Education Policy, all of you are familiar with it, has a significant part of its thrust, that is in terms of climate education in schools at every level. and also through the university curriculum. Yeah. I actually just had one or two points. While the scope of this work is enormous, I think there is immense possibility, particularly at the level of faculty development, both at schools and colleges, and the universities in general, because a lot of us are not specifically, we know what is climate change. Let me clarify. It's not that the teaching community is not familiar. They are. Perhaps at the schools you don't face this problem. At the university level, the teachers who actually work with the climate related courses, because it seems so generic. Now this is where the dangerous part is, because there is tons of PowerPoints available on, everybody talks about climate change, it's generic information. So it seems like the climate courses, like 4-credit courses in undergraduate level, they are taught with the help of some 250 PowerPoint slides, nobody reads them, nothing happens, you give an assignment, students will take 5 minutes to give you the answer, and they wouldn't have even seen it. You know how it works, right? GPT-5, even Gemini, like Google, they can dig out material so beautifully. Nobody is going to do any of that. So those 250 slides, God knows what it is meant for. So the thing is that there is also a possibility at the scale of faculty development and teachers who are specifically interested in climate to actually retool themselves. Lots of certification courses through SWAYAM, etc. are possible, and I think that is going to happen. Usually this is how public policy sometimes moves. There is a thrust, but the skill sets that are needed for imparting climate education is just lagging a little bit. Like you said, the average, it's lagging. So it's already at 1.5. The fraternity is just gradually getting into it. I participate in faculty development, some of these programs, and I see that there is a lag. I actually wanted to say one specific thing, actually. So NEP, and it's already integrated. Schools have had it for 3-4 years now. Most of the good schools, have actually fairly well.
The green school that's here today as well.
Well development climate discussions. The only thing missing is what Matthew flagged us on, critical thinking. Please note that table. Where is India actually in terms of per capita contribution? It's a very, very important table. There is a whole lot more when it comes to mitigation and so on and so forth. So when your airline says, an airline like Qantas says that we are now net zero, you must wonder, how the hell did you get to net zero? Your commercial work actually went up 30% in the last 5 years. How did you get to net zero? So this politics around these things, I mean critical thinking. So it gives you a psychic satisfaction that I'm traveling by Qantas, I'm net zero, but what they have actually done is through a complex web of mitigation systems, they have allocated some money. You can make yourself net zero, isn't it? It depends on which country. US, I think it's $48 or something.
There's a cost, and
There's
you
a cost.
pay that cost, and you get that
I
ticket.
think for India probably, it probably is 1 rupee or something, if you go by the math that is involved. So some of this story around mitigation, right? What do our tree plantations actually do? Don't bother your teachers with this. These are questions, I mean you can bother them, but these are questions you must, what is this endless tree plantation going on?
We have to, there are students here, we will, for the sake of the students, speak about good things about tree plantations.
No, they are useful in the context of climate change.
Thank you.
How does it really work, right? Do have a critical thinking around it. I'm just saying that. The last point, I mean, I'll make only 2 small points. One good thing about the Indian education system, I mean, I do not know how it works out eventually. Students are extremely competitive. Extremely competitive. All of you, I have full faith, all of you are extremely competitive. So, and the market is going to drive this conversation mostly, which means my graduates in environmental studies, most of them are immediately getting soaked up in some climate related industry, consultancy, something or the other. So there's a lot of work. So it is obvious that some of you, whichever field you are in, you are going to be, you will take climate change discussions much more seriously, one way or the other, because work is going to be there. So that is one of the reasons why these certification courses in undergraduate level and so on and so forth, or UGC certifications, which are independent, they are consumed so, I mean, there is so much consumption. So the uptake of climate courses is also pretty high, and it's just went up exponentially in the last 2-3 years, right? So climate education is on the upsurge, everything is very good, and there is a lot of demand for jobs and so on. So you are naturally going to drift in that direction. It's not something I mean, I don't have to do anything about it. I just wanted to.
We'll come back to you because we are rolling about with this is an opening statement round, and we'll come back to you with more questions. I have given you a list of questions previously I think I'll make you ask those. That is perfectly all right. In fact, Suresh's point was completely understood by students, as you've said, about being more critical. But what Suresh just mentioned to you was, you remember the table that Matthew presented on per capita climate. I would like to, Suresh, if you could pass the mic to Dr. Sushila Negi right next to you. She's she's one of the senior most scientists in the Department of Science and Technology of the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India, and she's been involved with climate policy making for the last 20 plus years. And she has been, actually she's the lady who knows that graph, which, you know, when all the students said, all of you in the audience said India, China, Russia, US, she knew exactly what country it is which is at the top, and she's been dealing at the COP meetings about this. So Sheila, my question to you is, what do you know, why do you think students, why do you think all of us have this feeling that it is these three countries, or these India, China, are making the major waves around the world in this, but whereas you at the policy level are aware where we stand truly? And what are your comments on what you've heard today, including Suresh and Matthew till now?
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you, Gitanjali, for having me here. And before responding to Gitanjali questions, I would like to take 1 minute. I saw that most of our students are not very enthusiastic about science. And that is completely okay, because we don't treat climate change as a science, because climate change is one subject which fits into the cross-sectoral of science, sociology, humanity, innovation, and all sector it covers. So no matter whether you are enthusiastic about science or not, but then you are enthusiastic about climate change study is very important to us. Taking clue from Professor Suresh Babu's, introduction, my opinion about the climate change science would be little different from Professor Suresh. One is that the science of climate change. Other one is the sustainability that we, usually we should be conscious about the sustainability mechanism that, we practice in our daily life. Being in the area of climate change science for last 2 decades, to me, the sustainability comes automatically to my mind. When I enter this conference room, I have realized that we don't need 122 bulbs for this conference to happen. We could have managed with 22 bulbs. So this automatically comes. It is my conscious, this is because since I have been practicing this for years, and I will always carry 1 spoon in my bag. It is not about carrying a spoon, but it is about wherever I can reduce, I would. So, this is a message to the students. Imagine, 20,000 students or 2,000 students in one school carrying 1 spoon. We are reducing the resources of washing, the water, the detergent, the use of plastic, etc. So to me, climate change is more of a conscious decision rather than anything else. So that would be, one thing. Coming to
the table, the per capita table.
Coming to the table, we have been always portrayed as number 3 in terms of emission. But if you see the per capita emissions of India, it is only 2 tons carbon dioxide, and it is far below the average emission of 4 tons CO2. It is a global average. And if we compare ourselves with the USA, their emission level is around 14 tons carbon dioxide. Okay, so at one point, we are the largest population in terms of population, as well as we are trying to. In the next few years, we will be the largest economies as well in the times to come. So we have to see our climate action from that perspective as well. So it is it is most of the portrait, how do we portray the Western world that India is contributing much, but our contribution per capita is much below the global average. Yeah,
Thank you so much. Can you pass the mic to Dr. Do you have another point? Please carry on. If you have another point, you tell us, because I'll ask you the next question then after that point. Dr. Mohanty, you have told us a bit today morning about CoDATA, about India CoDATA, but you also lead India's National Biological Data Mission. What lessons do you think there are that we can carry from life sciences to climate data ecosystems? Is India even ready for a nationwide data ecosystem right now?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gitanjali, for a very important question. Probably we are not even thinking how to keep the climate data. So, because if you think, those of you who don't know what is Indian Biological Data Center, it's like when you come to biology, you deal with DNA sequence, protein sequence, structures of proteins, or some metabolites which are in our body associated with diseases, some metabolites from the plants, natural products, and all these things. So all these data which comes from different experiments and all, there are international repository like NCBI who keeps this data in US, there are European Bioinformatics Institute keeps this data in the Europe, and DNA Data Bank of Japan keeps in Japan. India, we did not have a primary repository which is compiling all this data, which all biological science related data all over the country. They were there in different research institute, or clinical data was in AIMS or with this thing. So this is an attempt which has just come few years back to have our own data repository. Of course, we are depositing to international repository, we should be doing that. But in addition to that, we should have our own repository. Like the global geopolitics we are talking, suddenly Mr. Trump may decide we will not give access to the data from NCBI to the researchers in India. So how do you deal with it? So we should all best is we work together, but we should remain prepared for the eventuality that is this. But if you think of the way this data is compiled, climate is not a variable there at all. We are talking of pathogens or some things, okay, these pathogens we saw, but the pathogens we are dealing with, it's changing with the climate. So how climate change is affecting new pathogens coming, or the same pathogens become more virulent, or there is more antimicrobial resistance, we need to think of a different data structure, we keep track of it. Like we think about the crop yields over the country in different districts and all. So people have analyzed the data patterns, like the way the last 30 to 40 years, like probably the meteorological science departments have kept how temperature has changed in different districts, or how rainfall has changed, or what type of thing. But the crop yield also has affected. But are these two things interrelated or something? If people who have analyzed this data, they have found patterns, like because of temperature change, how the crop yield has changed, how the disease has changed. I think we have still not prepared. Like this data is there, this data is scattered. There is some government department who is keeping track of data on environment, data on climate and all. There is some government department keeping data on the plants, agriculture, crop yield. There is another government department, or the Department of Biotechnology we come from. Maybe that's why we are keeping biological science data. But all these data resources should be integrated, and so that you can answer these questions, how change in climate is affecting the pathogen virulence, or how it is affecting the crop yield. We need to think of how to do this, and that is where it needs more awareness. There was some few weeks back, I attended a meeting which was attended by Principal Scientific Advisors Initiative to talk of bringing all the data sources together. But this was still in the context of One Health, and climate was still not that much represented in the community, though they made an effort to call all government departments. And when it comes to government data, there is a lot of bureaucratic regulations, like whether this data this department can share, not share, and all these things. We need a lot of changes in our own thinking. Like sometimes the data is not really, it's by releasing this data in public that it will probably do more good rather than any harm or anything. But we have been conservative. Oh, this is the data, this should not be released unless it is approved by at a very higher level. So that attitude has to change. Only there are some data which are personal in nature or this thing that can be kept confidential, whereas all other data should be shared. So we need to think in that direction, and we can, in India, because we have a huge country, we have people scattered all over the country, even the students can contribute how to collect this data. It doesn't necessarily have to be compiled, like government relies on a government officer who collecting the data because they can trust him. But the way you saw Wikipedia has developed, anybody can go and edit things there. When a lot of people participate, if somebody puts something wrong, other people will come and correct it. So that is how in Wikipedia you will get quite a repeatable. So we need to think of other new data models which will come with participation of students and participation of the large community, and this the climate-centric data models, and this has to be integrative. Like as Matthew talked, we cannot think of climate as isolation, like even the changes, it has to be an integral approach and all. Like, so we need to think in a new way and think of new data structure, and as of now probably it doesn't exist.
But the India CoDATA is here, and so we intend to make that difference. Thank you very much, Dr. Mahanti. You can pass the mic back to Matthew now for the opening round of questions. While I ask Matthew this question for the opening round, I want you all to please think about questions that you wish to put to the panel, which I'm going to open very soon, on curriculum, on pedagogy, on skills and careers related to climate. If you have any questions, whether it is teachers or parents or students, please feel free to ask. Matthew, you have today morning given us a brilliantly unique perspective to climate change education, and climate change is a moral and a philosophical crisis, more than a scientific crisis as we see as scientists, mostly as a scientific crisis. But what you've shown us is that it is a moral crisis and it's a philosophical crisis. How do you think we can integrate this ethical dimension into school curricula where STEM education is already happening, so that students see it as something more than just another subject? What do you think about that?
That's a great question. I think if you look at the people who sat next to me, who are doctors and professors, when you're onto your research, there's a part of you as a human being which is, I'm going to just say the word, onto something. It's like a project or a purpose. And you don't get out of bed when you're doing your research or something and think, does this make me happy or sad? And very often with climate change, what I confronted with my parents or teachers is like, yeah, but is this not a little bit sad? Is it not depressing? Is it not, do we not turn students off by being negative? And I want to reject this split between happy, sad, positive, negative. Because climate,
yep. Tap it again and it should work.
It's a false split. Because as humans, you are energized when you're onto something, when you're doing a project. Your well-being, you feel good when you're involved in something and you're researching, you're digging, and you're talking, you're doing. So I think in terms of like the ethics of it, there's a real.
Tap it again.
There's a real. There's a no. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So there's a real empowerment that happens. I see it in all the students of the Climate Academy because they feel a sense of purpose, and then what happens then is that it becomes a moral issue. Then it becomes something, and it's right and wrong, and you have an energy because as a human being, as I didn't say the word political, but we are political animals. We understand justice, and when you are connected to issues of justice, that's incredibly motivating. So that's in terms of the ethical dimensions of things. Yes, it is. First of all, you've got to get the science right. But then you're into questions of identity, into questions of human purpose, into questions of justice. And these are the strongest things that we feel as human beings.
That's exactly what in fact, that takes me right back to Professor Suresh Babu, because what you said, Matthew, just now, are we overwhelming the students with these, is there a balance? And you as teachers, you and Suresh are both, you've been teachers at university and schools. So Suresh, how do we balance the core STEM learning with this new climate literacy that we all feel compelled to add to the, for the students without overwhelming these guys? And can we actually design, and have you been designing climate across the curriculum kind of at the university? What do you think about? You have the mic right there. You can pick it up. Maybe that will see which one works. Yeah, it does.
This works, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So I'll try to be precise this time. There are 2-3 things that I think we agree on that. That there is a bit of a fatigue when all of you come to the university stage. And the fatigue primarily, if I think echo one of my colleagues who had asked a question from there, was that what can we really do? There was a question earlier, right?
Yes.
What kind of activity can we do? So so what happens is that there's a lot of conversation and a lot of discussion around climate change, and the conversation ends with this fatigue, that I as an individual can't do anything. If I switch off the light at some point, it's not working. If I segregate waste, it's again going back and getting mixed up. So there is this fatigue that the students sort of come up. First thing I would like to say is that no, systems are changing. So segregation at some point downstream is going to work. And similarly, all the other sustainability actions that it is going to integrate with the larger project. It's just going to be, it's going to take some more time. But what I would tell my colleagues in the schools and colleges also is that the effort has to be made in terms of how to make more immersive curricula, in the sense that how can we have a live engagement with climate. Now, one problem we face immediately is that, oh, okay, CO2 is going up, how do I design? I think Matthew has done some games and hands-on things in some schools, so that's one way to go, communicate concepts to students, perhaps early students also. You guys are already in higher classes, through games and so through sort of immersive activities. But there is another suggestion I have also, which is surely, these are all places of innovation. There is a lot of innovation in instructional design, pedagogy for climate science. So there is a lot of work going on also. The other suggestion that I have is we can enroll into more and more citizen science projects, because there is a possibility that the students can actually be monitoring things. Like small example, I would say there are Bangalore, there is a lot of schools that are involved in monitoring. It's just that every batch in class 9th is doing this AV funnel survey.
The 21K has students in Bangalore, I'm aware of that
yeah,
also.
So they are doing bird surveys. Every year they just do bird surveys, and then there is a discussion on what composition has changed, etc. Similarly, there's data some of these schools are maintaining with respect to pollination, the flowering of trees, for instance. And if we had that data, for instance, for Delhi, we would have seen shifts in 20 years. There are certain things like your amaltas, its sequence has changed a little bit in the last 20 years. So this kind of data, citizen science data, which can be about species, their distribution, migration, etc., perhaps also in terms of local climates, air quality, even water quality parameters. Some of these things can be done by students, and through those experiments, they learn the way the data is collected, but the data is also being collected for long term. So in India, we have absolute scarcity of environmental data, absolute scarcity. We do not have long-term environmental data. So if your school is located in some particular place, at least, does your school, any of your schools have a rain gauge?
A rain gauge. Does the Green School have a rain gauge?
See what I mean? In the sense that if you need data, you will go back to Lodi, IMD or the 5-7 stations. Whereas the school can have this on display. Okay. More than the display, the data can be accumulated for a period of time.
That's
so these kinds of small things,
yeah.
Right? And now I think all of you have some urban farming projects. I'll just finish. There are these urban farming projects, and these kinds of things are happening. But I would think that maybe my sensitivity is more towards the biological sciences. So you can actually monitor the life cycles of insects and all. So these can be incorporated into small curriculums, small projects and so on. It will require more work on our part to prepare the life cycle and see which time to show what, etc. And if there is a change, certain things so these kinds of things are definitely possible. So citizen science and citizens supported research basically is something that can be tangible, and the data that you are collecting, if the methodology is appropriate, is as good as what a scientist will do. It's the same thing, right? If you're doing avifauna, if the sampling survey design is standard, it's acceptable. So there is a lot of possibility on that frontier, I feel. I would want to say that another field that has come in is ecological restoration and urban farming. These are two projects I see operating in schools that are actually quite different from the other projects we do, because there is actually something you do with your hand, like you're planting or creating a small forest or a Miyawaki, right? So there is something you do, and you say 2012 batch that did this, and we are sitting in a garden which is now in 10 years has been, it's very different from saying, certain kinds of things which are symbolic, like switch off karna, electricity and so on, right? Yes. This is something that has tangible outcomes, and I see we have a restoration site, some of you can visit in Dheerpur. It's a restored wetland. It's done by students almost entirely, of course college students, but few schools have visited. So these things have a very tangible impact on particularly smaller the younger classes, that there is something I can do that has an actual impact, and it cumulatively adds up to something.
And what you're saying is, I think what you're saying is making climate educational straight away aspirational for young people, not just an obligation. And through the ideas that you've just given, Professor Babu, I think this is where we kind of ask you, today morning some of you raised your hand, others didn't raise your hand, ki science karna hai ki nahi. But what kind of careers are you thinking of? Can you think of careers beyond doctors, engineers, something like that? And do we have new career pathways that are emerging from a strong climate-based education, which I think with your 2 decades of experience, Dr. Sushila, you would have seen. Tomorrow if we raise hands with children and ask you, what do you want to be? Do you want to be climate data scientists? Do you want to be resilience planners? Do you want to be sustainability officers? Do you want to be so many things that we didn't know of when we were students? Please raise your hand if you have questions for the audience. Anybody, but Sushila, you can take your, I would like your comment on these aspirational career paths for students now in 2025.
Yeah. Before responding to the career part, I would like to add what Professor Babu had said. This is for the principal, not for the students. For the government schools in Uttarakhand or in Odisha, we have established the meteorological lab in these government schools. Throughout the Uttarakhand, we have established around 10,000 meteorological labs. That doesn't cost much. It is just the rain gauge, wind anemometer, or minimum or maximum thermometer. And each student of class 9 and class 11 were trained to take the weather parameter every day. So that is like learning by doing. So they are actually owning the data that they have taken, rather than believing in the news, what they are actually reporting. You can always compare your data, what news is reporting. So we have many incidences wherein the NDTV will report कि पालम में temperature 47 हो गया, but our student will report no, there was the temperature only 44 degree. So the 3 degree temperature will make a lot of difference. So this is my humble request to the principals which are having a physical school, that you can also have something called as meteorological laboratory in your school, and which is not very that is very not very costly. And coming to the career in climate science is concerned, as I already said, climate change science is a very interdisciplinary in nature. Yes. It's fit into finance, it fits into sociology, it fits into innovation, it fits into all aspect of science. So I don't know, you may be aware that Government of India has National Action Plan on Climate Change. So I have been leading the 2 national missions on strategic knowledge and National Mission on Sustaining the Himalayan Ecosystem. So wherein we have established Center of Excellence across the IITs, in 16 IITs, state universities and central universities. And over the period of time, we have seen that lot of opportunities coming up in climate modeling, early warning system, interdisciplinary science and climate change.
And these are international positions where
yes,
you work with the
international,
WHO,
human
with the United
capacity,
Nations.
Yes, human health and climate change and
Yes.
human health. And there are many startups coming up who are developing an app. IIT Delhi has developed an app for heat stress that we are in negotiation with the Delhi police, where they can utilize that app who are in the field, so that
Very
we
interesting.
can predict what kind of heat wave or the flood is expected in the near future, so that they can take a precautionary measure. So that kind of, and then in the finance sector, we have climate, carbon credit,
Yes.
carbon finance, carbon bond, green bond. So lot of opportunities are there in
Carbon
the
credits
climate
का पूरा industry बन चुका है. What
Industry,
Suresh had told me,
exactly.
was earlier mentioning, was similar to that.
Exactly. So apart from that, we also have a lot of adaptation strategies going on, and then you can be a climate warrior, the sustainable warrior, and we have also established a lot of eco club in each schools. So most of the government schools will have, and many of the private schools
Are
will
also
have.
having, of course.
So in the time to come, we will see we can see a lot of new opportunities coming up in interdisciplinary areas.
That's what they need to know, absolutely. Does anybody have questions? I'm aware that some of you, please stand up, tell us your name and your class, and then ask your question.
My name is Ricky. I am from 11th, and my question is from Suresh sir, that can you share some story about where climate science directly help the community to adapt the climate change?
There could be many examples. So, for instance, in the Indian Himalayas, as Dr. Negi has mentioned, so think of a situation, a real situation where the upper elevation in Himalayas, people live on pastoralism. That is, they move from place to place for their animals to get their forage, and their mobility depends on how pastures are available, for instance. So there are certain findings that we have in the last almost 5-7 years, that's actually helping the communities to change their mobility patterns in such ways that they can actually have more, they're going with the changes that is going on. It seems like these elevations, particularly in Trans-Himalayas, for instance, are places where most vulnerable to climate change. And just to add, it's a good question, and there could be other examples also. Pardon?
Yeah, I will also add on that. I would have more than 100 examples on that, because we have been working in that area. So one example, what I would like to share is, the Dehradun Masuri belt is known as the apple belt of Uttarakhand. So over the period of time, the apple grower have faced that there is no apple production in that belt. So a lot of research was done by ICR for a number of years, and they have come up with resistant varieties, and number of varieties. But somehow the apple production was still reducing in that area. So towards the end of all the research, we have realized that it is not because of the variety of the apple, but it is because the honeybee population was reducing over the period of time because of the changing climate.
The productivity impacted
that. It is the pollinator which was not there. So we have started giving them beehives, and then now that belt is
very interesting. So does that answer your question? These stories. Do you want to hear the rest of the 100 stories also? अगली बार बुलाना पड़ेगा तुमको definitely.
And you see, I am from a mountain region, and I grew up in mountain, crossing the glaciers, doing skating and skiing. And there used to be a fixed timing. We knew that on Christmas there would be a snowfall, and everybody will be ready with their skating shoes and whatever the instrument we required. But over the period of time, and then people from Delhi or Chandigarh or Punjab will also start going to Himachal Pradesh, Kufri, ki barish hoi, baraf padegi. But last 4-5 years there was no snowfall.
Yeah, it hasn't snowed on Christmas Day. Absolutely, जितना भी booking करोगे चलेगा नहीं.
This is a change we.
And it used to snow, and it used to snow from my childhood. I remember my parents used to take me. You're absolutely right.
So this is the kind of changes we see, every day. So Dr. Babu has, really pointed out, critical thinking is very, very important. कि ऐसा हो रहा था, लेकिन अब क्यों नहीं हो रहा है? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Who's with the next question? There's a young lady at the front. Please take the mic. Tell us your name. And may I ask Dr. Mehra to please come on stage because बच्चे आपसे भी question पूछेंगे तो आप ऊपर ही आ जाएं क्योंकि अब ये last session है and then we will close for tea. But if you come here, please, Dr. Mehra. He's the head of CoDATA in India, the chair of CoDATA in India. Yes, please. Yes. तो मैं काफ़ी देर से सोच रही हूँ मैंने आपको बोलना है ऊपर आ जाएं और मैं बोल नहीं पाई. Please ask your question. Tell us your name. You'll have to switch it. Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to the myself Vishika Verma from SD Public School. So as a young learner, as a young student, I have a question in my mind, and I also believe that when responsibility meets knowledge, change is definitely possible. So my question here arises is, which green technology innovation excites you the most right now? It may be from the developing country or from the developed country. So may I repeat the question? It's which green technology innovation excites you the most right now? Thank you.
Yeah. I can go. So first I'm going to be a little bit naughty. Okay. And I'm going to say that innovation is actually driving emissions in general. So one of the myths that we have to get over is that innovation can fix things, because innovation creates new things which we now need, which we didn't need before, and so on. So innovation, we have to be just being naughty and in a sense undermining your question. But now I'm going to answer it in a way because it is a good question, and I think there are very few innovations out there which have real capacity to, but the one which is, if you like, a silver bullet is carbon capture. If we could work out how to capture carbon from the atmosphere, that's a game changer. And I think I would love to talk more with Gitanjali about that. But because there's many ways to do it, and that if we really invested in that, that's a big game changer. And if I just finish with one metaphor, you know, when it was World War II, if I talk about my own country, my home country, the UK, Winston Churchill insisted that the troops had to land on the beaches of France to beat the Nazi troops, and everybody told him it's impossible. He said, "Don't tell me that." He said, "Don't argue the details. You need to make it happen. We need boats that can land on those beaches." And because it was absolutely imperative, it happened. And so we need that for carbon capture. We need to go at that like an animal. We need that to work.
Thank you. Truly encouraged by your answer.
One last question now, because the tea people have been calling again and again that the high tea is ready outside and all the children need to go inside.
Greetings to everyone present here. Myself, Gautam Adhoki from SD Public School. My question is to Sir Matthew, is that despite of various national and international summits and campaigns, for example, the Kyoto Protocol or the Paris Agreement, which was signed to reduce the global greenhouse gases emissions, why is the emissions still high despite various policies like Sir just showed the data, and why is the gap between the policy and ground level action and their impact is still so wide, and what can be done to bridge the gap?
That's a huge question. I'm going to...
Sorry. Okay.
If I could answer that in...
I can repeat the question. Should I repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's a great question. I'm saying the answer is huge.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I think, let me again be naughty, and I'm just going to say, if you look at the fossil fuel industry, that is one major reason why. They have got their tentacles everywhere, inside government departments, and we have to just be honest about it. You know, for the sake of a tiny minority of people, shareholders or CEOs of the fossil fuel industry, they are holding the rest of humanity, in a sense, to ransom. And they do it in very subtle ways. They do it in, you know, those numbers which I showed you before, the data which shows that India is only 1.4 and Belgium is in the, you know, I was in COP and I got cancelled in COP. And when you just dig a little bit deeper, you start to see where the real machinery is. So, but as you say, you've got to be sharp. You've got to be, what you say with net zero, you can't just take things at face value. And when you start to really get into the complexity of this, the economic, the social, the political, the psychological, So this answer is a huge answer, but you find it's very interesting. There's all kinds of layers to this, and then you start to see why we've not made progress yet.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I am from 21K school. My name is Jivansh. So my main question was that what is the misconception that people have of climate change? My question is to Mr. Matthew.
I'm sorry. I think, for me, I posted on social media a couple of days ago 2 pictures of the Mona Lisa. One picture, just like that, and one with a frame. One with a frame, one without a frame. There are so many, as you said, there are so many climate educational things now. You go on the internet, it's just a whole swarm of climate educational stuff. But how much of it is actually framed by planetary boundaries? How much of it actually defined by those carbon limits? How much of it is sharply aware of that? So that's the key thing which is not understood. And once you understand that, everything else then falls into place. And you can indulge the details, but we are, as humanity, we are just lost in details. We're lost in details. So first you've got to get the main frame right, and then you can look at the picture properly. So that's the key thing that's missing.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
But not for me.
The panel will decide who will answer your question. You just put your question.
Ma'am, actually, I don't have a question for any of us. So, Matthew, sir, you are saved. I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all the panelist members for inviting our school and taking the initiative to discuss on this essential matter. I was very, sorry.
Not sure kya hone wala hai.
Yeah, it was. I was not sure, but I was also very amazed by the idea put forward by Matthew sir and you, whatever you have discussed during the registration time also. In our school, what we have thought, like as a green school, we have done various initiatives from plastic to compost pit, rainwater harvesting, solar panels. But when I came here today, and I think all of you must will agree with me that we got to know more big things like about transformative education from tipping points or from everything, the growth one.
And putting the rain gauge in the school.
Yeah, absolutely, ma'am. Ma'am, being a ZIR representing my school in the District Interact Council, I will surely give a proposal to the District Interact to put rain gauge in every school. In the and meteorological department also. So thank you very much for an informative session. Thank you.
Thank you to our panelist and moderator for their valuable insights. As we are at the end of today's conclave, hope you guys enjoy and learn something new. So we extend a warm gratitude to our distinguished panelists, speakers and participants, students, teachers, IT department of the INSA, and each one of you if I forgot. So together we have taken another step towards integrating climate science with society through education and policy. So I think somebody lost this.
Oh.
They can collect.
Gaadi ki chabi hai ki?
No, it's airport.
Can I request the panelists to come to the front for a picture, please, together? And then we'll ask the students together so we can have
Oh.
a joint picture of all of us. Meanwhile, some AirPods hai, earphones hai, aapke liye. Actually, saath hi lete hain picture.
ना, इससे हो नहीं रहा था।
अरे वो उसकी स्लाइड्स में ज़्यादा ही बहुत एनिमेशंस। ये किसका है, ले जाओ।